like to say hello to you all again. I think the last time that I had the opportunity to speak to you, we just briefly touched on some of the initial outcomes of the diversity planning process, but now we have analysed, or like myself has analysed all the data, and I can actually give you really in-depth understanding of where the West sector is heading in relation to diversity planning. So if you like, we have our navigation set for the next 12 months. So to give you an idea, I'm going to talk through the snapshot and I'll sort of follow through in this direction. So with the snapshot so we had 38 out of the 42 service providers submit a plan, so that's 90%, which is fantastic, great engagement. We had a total of 477 actions across the whole West Metro sector submitted in those plans. And this is significant because it is a 256 action increase from the previous cycle, which had been a review cycle, and demonstrates a 53% increase in diversity-related actions. So this is demonstrating commitment, engagement, and some serious thought went into your diversity plans in relation to considering how to support clients. 87% of these agencies took a whole of organisation approach to their planning. This is quite significant as well, because you're considering your work within your organisation, and ultimately this work will embed and increase your whole of organisational capacity rather than just one branch or one team. And 50% of agencies access the diversity planning workshop. So we were able to provide you with that information on the onset. So we provided 4 planning workshops. We had individual plan support and review processes and providing feedback. So there was quite a few drafts that I had the opportunity to work with and be able to provide feedback to those agencies, so to have a better understanding of what the purpose behind the planning is. Now I'll come down to here. So we have a look at just a breakdown of agency funding sources. We can see that the majority of the Western sector in relation to diversity is very much both HAC, PYP and CHSP funded, and there are only a small percentage of agencies that receive just CHSP or HAC, PYP. Here we have a breakdown of all the agency types. So we have 3 community health, we have 7 local government, we have 14 or 13? 13 called specific organisations, and the rest, which is 15, is other non-government organisations. Along the line, actions by funding type, you'll be able to see that 47% of the actions were both funding streams. Only 7% were just for HAC, PYP funded actions, and only 18.8 was for older CHSP funding actions. So there's a good distribution in terms of how the sector's gone about in terms of developing actions per their funding. As we move up to the corner here in the colourful graph, it gives you a first indication of where the sector is interested in relation to the focus areas. So if you think back to the planning process, you'll know that there are 10 focus areas that you are required to provide actions to. And I guess there's no surprise that CALD is number 1. In fact, there was an extra 80 actions, a total of 196 across the sector. So we have quite a few ethno-specific organisations in the West, far more than represented than any other metro sector. So it's very representative of that. As you can see, as you go along, we have a huge increase in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander actions, as well as LGBTI, financial and social disadvantage, and dementia. And then we have quite a significant drop. So when we hit homelessness, people who are at risk of homelessness, people who are veterans, people who live in rural and remote, people who have had their children separated or removed and experienced forced adoption, and people who are care leavers, so those who have experienced institutionalisation through their childhood, they come up as quite low. Now, this again can be explained indicative in fact that the sector hasn't received a whole lot of support or capacity building in these areas, and that's something that the diversity advisor role is designed to support you with. But I think it's important now that we have hard figures to start thinking about how in future planning cycles we might want to increase this area to be comparative to the other areas, so we're not necessarily working just for 4 groups and we're distributed well across all the focus areas. So to give you an example, well, actually in a few slides ahead I'll show you some of the stuff that we'll be doing in relation to that capacity building. So, this is taking us back to the aged care framework. So, right up here, I'm going to talk to you about the layout or the spread of actions and how they relate back to this particular framework. Up the top here, we've got the imperatives that the aged care framework provides. If you could think of these imperatives as a little bit like the way that the ship is being steered or the long-term outcomes that we're looking for in relation to best practice in diversity. That's why I've put them back up here, because essentially they are our goalposts, if you like. If we go down along the line with the outcomes for consumers, this particular piece of work was the first time that agencies were asked to link their actions to the aged care framework, which was released in 2017. The aged care framework, like I just mentioned, in relation to the imperatives, is the best practice foundation for this work, and it was released by the Commonwealth. In relation to the West, you will see, and let me just make a point around the first time that we were asked to do this. It takes quite a lot of time to learn a process, and so I think it was fair to say that there was a lot of repetition around how to link back some of these consumer outcomes and what essentially they meant. And some of the language was a little bit broad, so as diversity advisors we worked together to be able to determine what did they actually refer back to in the practice of your work. So respectful and inclusive services ranked the highest with 33%, and respectful and inclusive services from the interpretation of the diversity advisors was really about training. And it was about looking at, as an organisation, how are you building capacity to deliver services to your clients. Now, the other thing about the consumer outcomes is that the action had to be developed thinking about the client's experience. And so that had, that brought up some interesting conversations, and I think they were really helpful because it was maybe an opportunity to consider how this action was actually going to benefit the client, or necessarily how the client will experience it. So other aspects of respectful and inclusive services is practice tools within your organisation, developing those, any audits that you might have about your practices and policies and procedures, and general capacity building. So I would say that this trend demonstrates that the West is focused on building practice and understanding in diversity, and that you're looking to look internally, what training can you access to build a better understanding of what best practice looks like, sensitive care looks like, and you're also interested in maintaining that knowledge within your organisation and moving forward. If you look further down with some of the other consumer outcomes like accessible care, supporting a proactive, flexible flexible system, and even down the bottom, meeting the needs of the most vulnerable. The way that I see this trend is that these focus areas require actions that are far more practice-based. So they require actions that demonstrate how you implement the particular project, or what is actually going to occur in your organisation, and how the practice is going to change. So in a sense, they're a little bit more sophisticated. So in the next cycle, we would hope that there is parity again, and there's increase, and we will see what impact the training has had in the organisations, because the actual actions will change. I have a list of some innovative actions I thought you might be interested to hear. Some of them that came out sort of first glance. It was hard to pick from 477. So let's see. So we had like a bilingual health sessions that will be focused on health literacy, and service access rights and available services. We had computer classes focused on improving digital literacy to navigate my aged care, developing a culturally responsive palliative care strategy, introducing social media platforms to socially isolated clients, introducing the idea of advanced care planning for those individuals living with dementia and their carers, working with peak bodies to identify clients who might be at risk of homelessness, or in effect identify clients and what signs to look for. Increasing the opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students to access work experience programs within services to increase workforce participation, and organising LGBTI training for board members, staff and volunteers, so ensuring that the top and the bottom receive the same type of training. And exploring opportunities to facilitate service navigation tours for vulnerable community groups. So clients already have an opportunity or have had a lived process or a walk through a service before they actually need to access it. So this is another very colourful graph, and I think this is one that I won't speak to too much because it gives us an opportunity to have a look at the distribution of action across the service type. So the 2 points that I'd like to make about this, and I will be sending these images through to you, these graphs through to you via email so you can have a better look. The 2 questions I'd like to pose to you is, what areas is your service type area focused on majority, in the sense of majority, and which areas are you not? Because this representation is really helpful to give us a sense of where the gaps are. And as an agency, within, say, community health or local government or call, consider why some of those actions some of those focus areas such as people who have been care leavers or people who have had children removed through forced adoption, or people who are homeless are low. So it's an opportunity to start seeing what other parts of the sector are doing and what parts your areas are not focusing in. I think importantly it creates a baseline for us now as well in terms of numbers and understanding, and we can increase the distribution of actions and ensure that there's better distribution of service effectively across the focus areas. So, education and training. There were a total of 81 actions across all diversity plans, 16% detailing the training and educational needs that the sector has chosen. I've divided it between staff and volunteers because I thought it was quite interesting that there was quite a focus on wanting to train volunteers and also staff, naturally, but there wasn't parity. So I think it's interesting to consider when we're training volunteers in a particular area, what areas may we not be training them in, and consider the effects on clients if they're not receiving that training. So to give you an idea, for agency staff who are interested in trauma-informed care, and I just make a point about trauma-informed care, in terms of a training option or a capacity building opportunity, it actually cuts across all of the focus areas. So in fact, that has great impact and would have inform your organisation, your agency, to better provide services for all the focus areas, not just one, which often is the case with a training session. Mental health first aid, awareness, working with interpreters, cultural awareness, inclusive orientation came up quite a lot, that agencies were thinking about their staff inductions and how they wanted their staff to know from the onset who their demographics are, what the organisation's commitments are, and also what their funding requirements are as well. People living with dementia, elder abuse, LGBTI, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, which is a cultural competency training that they were asking for, people at risk of homelessness, and financial and social disadvantage. So again, in fact, this mirrors back some of the areas that I discussed earlier in relation to where people want to train. or I guess where agencies are seeing a lack in capacity. And with volunteers, we've got digital literacy, cultural awareness, dementia, people living with dementia, inclusive orientations, and LGBTI. So I'll just take this opportunity to remind you of the Victorian Community Education and Training Service, and run by Swinburne University, and that you are able to go onto their website now. And I've listed the website. Again, I mentioned I'm sending these slides out to you, but the important thing is that they have a diversity practice page, and I would highly recommend that you look through the courses. They more or less 90% reflect back the focus areas, and register your interest. Now this is really important because there currently isn't any allocated sessions for the West. So the moment that we start letting the provider know that there are people that are ready and willing to go, then sessions will start being organised and commenced, and we'll hear more from them later today. But I think it's important that we link this back because this is what is being provided to the sector. So, I'm almost done. So this is my last slide. I just want to tell you a little bit about what the diversity area is going to be doing. This is the sort of where to from here for the next 6 months of next year. You would have sat down on a little DL, which is the save the date. Now the North Metro advisor, myself, the diversity advisor, and myself for the West Metro, we're going to do a joint Northwest Diversity Forum. So this is an opportunity for all agencies in the sector to come together, mainly to connect with expert advice. So whether it's coming from a peak body or an expert-led agency, it's an opportunity for the sector to really profile the diversity work and to better understand what are some of the what are some of the best practice areas that are happening. So we're in the planning process of that at the moment, but we'd love you to put that date in your calendar, and we'll be sending out invites and booking information in early January to get you guys on board. What more can I say to get you there? It'll be a great opportunity to network as well. I think a great opportunity to share information across the sector and to see what's worked. The next information is, hang on, there's one more bit of information. I will be sending you a 2-minute survey in relation to the Diversity Forum, just to get a sense of how you would like that information delivered. So if you want, really it's just how you like to learn this information. So I'll be sending that out, and I'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out for me, because it will inform how we deliver the day. The other thing will be that we'll be delivering Lgbti workshops in collaboration with VALS. VALS receives funding to provide this information to the sector, and most of the other metro sectors and across Victoria have also received these trainings. So what I'm going to do in the onset is I'm going to contact those agencies that have already indicated in the diversity plans that they'll be focusing on either rainbow tick accreditation and or looking to increase capacity in this area, and just have a discussion around, would you like this training in-house? Would you like this training externally? And then we'll offer both options. But I think it's important that we touch base with those agencies that want to work in this area and facilitate that process. So that'll be coming again in January. Bookings will be open for that, and promotion will be happening. In relation to the third forum, Understanding Forgotten Australians, Former Child Migrants, Stolen Generations and People Affected by Past and Forced Adoption Practices. This is a particular forum that's been delivered already across Victoria in the different metro and regional areas. And this is a first step into understanding 2 of the focus areas within your diversity planning requirements. And I highly recommend that you attend. I have a date, even at the time of printing we didn't have a date, but I do have a date. It'll be April the 2nd of April 2019, and it will be at VU Sunshine. So I will be sending out, again, information and booking availability. I've got the wind down and I've still got stuff to say. So what's going to happen with this is it's a joint presentation, and I'll stop talking about that, but please attend. And the last thing that I'd like to talk to you about is that and this is the, if you didn't already see it, here is the DL that I'd love you to take home. So the last thing I'd like to announce is that we, with the diversity advisor and in our area, myself, we're announcing the 2019 Diversity Grants for Capacity Building. So this money is an opportunity for organisations that have stipulated that they want to do training, but doesn't necessarily fit within the scope of what Swinburne is offering, and or internally cannot offer this in training themselves, and they would like some support to access that. So I'm very excited to be able to provide you with guidelines for application today, and that the grants open today and they close on the 22nd of February. There are 5 grants available, each are $2,000. It's not a huge amount of money, but you can consider it a seed funding for your organisation to start considering how you might, what kind of training your organisation needs and how you will implement that knowledge back into your organisation. The important thing I want to point out is that we will be offering grant writing support. So that will happen early next year or late next January, and that will be open to the whole sector. So again, I'll be sending information out so that people can access a grant writing support workshop and bounce ideas. And then the successful applicants will all receive a one-day workshop where they can really maximise their grant planning and then be able to implement something that will have impact and sustainability. So I'll leave these on the table and I'd like you to take one. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for listening.